What's up, everybody? Mark with Kardavox Academy here, and recently I put up a video saying something's got to change in 2026. Basically, that I wanted to do new types of content on the channel. And one of the requests I got quite a few, but one of the main requests I got was for more vocal tutorials. And that's something I've shied away from a little bit because they are a dime a dozen. But, people talked about, well, you should do them anyway because we could get a better idea for your teaching style. And so I said, hey, why not? And so in this vocal tutorial, we're going to be talking about one of the biggest issues that people come to me for help on. And I'm going to try to do this all in one go. I'm going to try to avoid any cuts because what I'd like to do is I'd like to speak to you, the viewer, just like you're one of my students, as much as I can in a pre-recorded, non-conversational setting. So when we are utilizing Kargria, this throat singing sound, when we are using that to transition to false chord, oftentimes you may find yourself running into a situation where your transition is leading you towards a sound that's not tenable, towards a sound that's not usable. And this is usually, almost always, I would say, an airflow issue. So you may find yourself having this sound, this problem. Now that's a situation where you don't need me to tell you that it's too breathy. You don't need a vocal coach for that. The issue comes from why it's happening. What's the situation that's causing this to occur and how do we rectify it, right? Now, most of the time, new vocalists or even longtime vocalists who maybe they've done fry their whole life and they're moving into a false chord setting, what they will do is they will try to solve this issue with air. And to a degree, that's reasonable. That makes sense, right? If the issue is that I'm dumping air, then I should work with air to fix the problem. And, if we want to get if we want to really focus on accuracy, well, the entirety of our voice is controlled with air. But what'll happen is they'll use more air. They'll just throw more air at the scream. And they get a false chord that sounds like this. Right. And you can put it in a mix and you can layer it 3 or 4 times and put a bunch of compressors on it and it sounds okay. Problem is, even that little amount that I did, I felt a little dizzy and I would get pretty raw. The other thing that people will often do is they will put less air into it. They'll say, well, if I am using too much air, then my solution is to use less. This is logical. This makes sense. But what it does is it gives them a sound like this. Wow. And then they have a scream that's really Batman. I'm Batman. Where's the girl? Again, this would, I'm dealing with, I'm just starting to get over this post-COVID cough. So all my stuff right now is admittedly a little bit swollen. But I got to make a video. It's my job. So my stuff might sound a little weird today, but it doesn't matter. But that would make me feel a little bit raw and, I would get dizzy very quickly. So where's the middle ground? We can see that there is something that we need to do with this Kargria to allow us to transition to false chord. Now, this is where vocal tutorials in short form, which I'm starting to put up a ton of those. I think the first one posts today, Wednesday, the time of this recording. I don't even know my own schedule. But part of the issue that we run into with short form vocal tutorials, which I'm not against, it's that they present vocal learning as a recipe. Take A, mix it with B, put it in the oven at temperature C for D amount of time, and you will get your loaf of sourdough. But this isn't the case because what we're working with is we're working with muscle. We're working with coordination. We're working with preconceived notions. You're not, you're not a pot that you just put ingredients in and get a result, right? And anybody who does a lot of cooking, like myself, especially baking, knows that even that's a temperamental process. You're a human being with thoughts and emotions. And, you've been listening to metal for so long that you have ideas of how this should work. So what we need to do is we need to show your body by way of creating a bridge what it's like to lean into false chord without losing the distortion. And so we're going to do something counterintuitive, which is we're going to leave the voice in. We're gonna leave it in. Who cares? Not me, not this guy. So what does that sound like? Well, this, by the way, presupposes that you have Kargria down good enough. Me, for example, I do Kargria for the sake of transitioning to false chord. So I'm sure that if I was like in a Kargria competition, I probably wouldn't place very high because my Kargria is specifically for transitioning to false chord. But you know, at this point, you've done your motorcycle engine revs. You've done your game show buzzer noises. You've done your little throat clears up towards the nose with your voice. And you have this. Almost every time when I get a student who, you know, they go to the website, they type in the form, here's the issue I'm having. Then when I have a spare moment, I can work through them. And they'll say, hey, I just can't get this transition down. Their Kargria that they're transitioning from sounds like this. Now, what would be wrong with that? What would be wrong with that, right? We would think nothing because it sounds good, right? That doesn't sound bad. But let's pause for a moment and let's think about what we're doing. By the way, we're speaking about a fundamental false chord tone. We're not talking about a false chord for I hybrid. We're not talking about a pitched false chord. We're not talking about like a compressed false chord. We're talking about the bare bones basic false chord sound that I think anybody who's ever going to use false chord should learn. We'll talk more about that at the end of the video. But let's pause for a second. Let's not just parrot exercises to ourselves in a mirror. Let's build understanding. Let's think about this. And I want you to answer this question either in the comments or to yourself. Tell me the difference. There are tons, but I want you to talk to me about one of the main differences. There's one specific I'm looking for between fear me, I am destruction of innocence. And I'm going to pop an ear off because, like I said, this COVID cough has got things kind of swollen. So, fear me, I am destruction of innocence. There's one main difference there. Now, I'm not going to do the Dora the Explorer stare at you in silence, right? If you want to take time to try to figure it out on your own, you can pause it. But the main difference that at least is relevant to this lesson is that the false chord is shouted. Now, it's shouted strategically. It's shouted in a way that's not going to hurt my voice. It's shouted in a way that is still relaxed. But if I take that false chord that I did, I think it's Reign of Darkness is the name of the song. Thy Art is Murder. The song is like 16 years old now. If I take that and I transition into my clean voice, you're going to hear the channel of power that it's going through. And you're going to hear the way that it's aimed. This is imperative because our screams are not just grit. Our screams are not just grit. So often as vocalists and as vocal learners, we think of, even though I think intuitively you know better, subconsciously, you think of the scream as starting and ending with distortion. But distortion is one ingredient in the complex recipe. And so I'll show you. If I take this, now I'm going to move away from the lyrics and I'm going to do something that's more like I can repeat. Maybe I'll say like a wow, wow, wow. Okay, so wow, right there. Wow, 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 wow. It's projected. Now, this isn't to say that every scream is projected in the same way. Some screams are really quiet. Something more like epiglottal and lower in volume. It doesn't follow the same path. We're just talking about a fundamental false chord right now. So if we think about this, if we put the pieces together, hang on a minute. If I am able to do that with my Kargria, perhaps when I transition into false chord, I will get the result that I want. Now we're building connections. Now we're starting to understand our screams, not just as recipes in 30-second tutorials, which again, I'm not above. You're going to see a lot of those going up on Instagram from me soon because you got to play the game. But now we're starting to understand the pieces of the puzzle. So let me show you a way to make this happen. Okay. You have your Kargria, right? Oh, Spyro just found a little dragon. This desert area was one of my favorites, right? Anyway, I totally have this here for the same reason that on TikTok, you'll have like the person talking and then there's the little dude like running and catching coins. It's the same thing. You know it. Why hide it? Anyway. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to focus on a couple things first. Number one, my throat doesn't feel tight. Number two, I feel the buzz of the Kargria in the front of the face. This is the resonance. This is not the distortion itself. I'm not creating the distortion here. I'm creating the distortion with my false folds, doing this over top of my vocal folds. Okay. And I feel a little bit of downward pressure, like I'm pushing out a steady fart. Like a, right? So I breathe in, right? And I'm going to use my hands like this so you can see that I'm not breathing up into my chest. Down into the belly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk in my Kargria for a little bit. Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Mark. This is Kardavox Academy. I teach people to scream online. It's a really weird job, but it's a cool job. There you go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more forward. I'm going to get a little bit New York, a little bit like I've been smoking and I buy gabagool. All right. Now at this point, I'm going to do another little mental check. Because a good sound with a bad feeling is a waste of time. A good sound with a bad feeling is a waste of time. Okay? That's not always true. But for right now, it's true. All right? So I'm going to take this Kargria and I'm going to break up a fight. I'm going to say, whoa, 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 whoa. Did you hear how I leaned into it? Did you hear how I added a little bit of volume, but it stayed Kargria? The distortion stayed mostly the same. The vocal cord connection stayed mostly the same, but it was projected up into my face. Hey, whoa, 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 guys, whoa, let's break it up here, all right? Let's all go home safe. Whoa, 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 whoa. Now, what I will tell you is that I do feel a very light narrowing at the top of my throat, not down by my vocal folds. It's very narrow. I have to look for it. And that is because if you look at laryngoscopies of a lot of false chord vocals, what I saw of my own false chords when I was up in Utah last year, that footage is not available yet. I don't know when it's going to be available, but you can actually see this. The vocalist of Hideous Divinity, Enrico Di Lorenzo, who is also a phoniatrician, like he's a scientist and a doctor, he has a scope where he's doing false chord, and you can see that when he does a the tissues above the vocal cords actually narrow. They come together. So this idea that false chord is just blowing air really far, really hard past your vocal anatomy, well, maybe that's true sometimes, but that's not what you're hearing me do. And that's not generally what I teach people to do. If you want to do that, you can, right? That's fine. It's not generally what people are looking for. So these tissues are coming together. And by projecting into this Kargria, hey guys, whoa, 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 hey, yo, Vinny, yo, hey, whoa. In projecting into this Kargria, I'm giving my brain, I'm creating a point of physical reference. A point of physical reference that I can use to anchor myself into a place where transitioning isn't going to make me dump my air. Okay. Now, this is an area where you are gonna possibly mess up if you take a misstep. And this is, by the way, not to make you feel scared. Oh, this is where vocalists make a mistake. We're all gonna make mistakes in our vocals. It's fine. But I just want to save you some time. I'm not trying to make you scared. I'm just trying to save you some time. Don't transition to Kargria yet, or to false chord yet. Don't do it. Do this for a week. Do this for 2 weeks. Get to the point. Yeah, get to the point, Mark. Get to the point where you can lean in right off the bat so you don't have to rev up into it, right? Hey, whoa, yeah, what's up, guys? Whoa, yeah. Right? Sounds very kind of like a caricature of Metallica. Ooh, baby, yeah. Or like a Bone Saws Ready. Right? Kind of like a Randy Savage sort of situation. Yeah. Right? Just do that for a little while. See how you feel after 5 or 10 minutes. Do you feel puffy? Do you feel disconnected? Does your voice not want to connect? If you do like a falsetto, mine doesn't want to connect right now because, again, I've been coughing nonstop for 2 weeks. So if I did the falsetto test in this moment, oh, it was better than I thought it was going to be. Literally, I've been coughing all night. It's waking me up like 2-3 times an hour. But anyway, then that is an indicator that you're not really ready to transition to false chord yet. Why would you take a baseline of tension and then add to it? Why would you take a debuff and put a debuff on it for my gamers out there? I wouldn't want to do that. Usually what that comes down to is a breath support, a connection issue. And that's where vocal coaches such as myself can help you out, right? That's a whole nother video. But let's say you've done this for a couple weeks. You feel good. You feel good. Everything's feeling up here. Your throat's feeling open. You feel a tiny little bit of narrowing, but not down by the vocal cords. You feel like you're pushing out a fart. And you're like, Mark, I am ready. Well, what we're actually going to do is we're going to become more airflow permissive. Okay? We're going to become more airflow permissive. We're going to allow air to come through. We're not going to squeeze down on it. That is a technique, by the way. You can do that. That's just not what we're doing here. And again, I'll explain why at the end of the video. We're not going to squeeze down on it. We're not going to add the old man squeeze to it. Again, you can. That's not what this is. What we're going to do is we're actually going to open and relax, and we're going to let air through. The easiest way to see it, although you don't want to do this too much on its own because it can dry out your vocal cords, the easiest way to understand it is if I was to go, hey, hi, whoa, I'm not going, hey, again, you can. That's just not what this is. If I do that under my projected cargaria, what's going to happen is the vocal cords are going to open up. They're going to disconnect. To what degree? I'm not sure. I would have to see the results of my MRI, which I have not seen yet. But what's going to happen is that airflow is it's going to come out less in a nice even stream like we get when our vocal cords are connected. We get this beautiful little beam of air. As my vocal cords open, it's going to become a bigger, chunkier stream of air. And that's going to take the tissues above and it's going to cause them to rattle in a different way. And so if I take this, hey, yo, whoa, guys, whoa, whoa, what I'm going to do, there are many different ways to do it. This is just one. I'm going to go, whoa, whoa, whoa. And with my cargaria, it's going to sound like this. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I feel that downward push. I don't feel any pain or strain here. Feels up and forward. Now I'm going to become airflow permissive on the second O. Whoa. I'm going to do this underneath. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Now, the clean singers among us and any clean singing vocal coaches that are seeing that, they're going to say, Mark, the vocal cords are getting stiff. You're putting airflow past them. They're going to wheeze. That's hard on the vocal cord edges. Yes, if we were doing just this. But part of the reason it has to sound this way is because I don't have the bracing of the supraglottal tissues, the tissues above. So I'm as closely as possible mimicking what I'm going to do with the airflow underneath. It does feel different. But if I try to put these together, right? Whoa, 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 baby. Now we got something. Right? I let go of the vocal cords. I become permissive with my airflow. I don't release everything. I project everything. And then we get a full squeeze with that. And now we have a baseline for something that we can actually use. And that's kind of it. At this point in a vocal lesson, I tell the student to sit with this for a couple weeks, right? Because it's going to take time for your body to memorize these feelings. It's going to take time for your body to memorize what it needs to do. You don't go to the gym and let's say you just started to bench 225. The moment you put 225 on, do you up it to 250? No way. You stay at 225 for a good amount of time. So when you're doing this, if your cargaria is good, for a while, until it's just so easy you don't even have to think about it, just focus on the projection. Whoa, 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 whoa. You can take the engine rev, which is a way to learn Kagri on its own, and utilize that to lean in, right? Do that until it's second nature. Then start thinking about becoming airflow permissive. Because if your body's not ready to hold on to that position, then what are you moving to the next step for? You're just going to frustrate yourself. Yo, 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 blow. You can throw a tunnel on it. You can, snarl it. You can put a little voice on it. You can lift it up into a high. Now, the last thing I'd like to leave you with is why I think it's so important for you to learn an airy false chord fundamental. And the reason is because when we learn a bunch of specialized techniques, when we learn, I want to learn this false chord from this song specifically in this way so I can make this sound, we have a lot of techniques that aren't necessarily built to work together. And what we find ourselves in is a position where I have a badass high and a badass low and a badass mid and no way to make them work together. Right? That's one thing. A very common type of student I get is somebody who sounds awesome already. They don't need my help sounding awesome, but for the life of them, they can't transition from a mid to a high or a high to a low. Now, this is not the only way, but I'm speaking to people who are predominantly doing false chord or at least non-traditional fry styles. If I transition from a low to a high, right? Give me a couple, because again, practice has been minimal since I've been letting my voice recover. If I transition from a low to a high, high to a low, what I can do, I don't have to, you don't have to, but what you can do, if you want it to sound really smooth, is you can move really quickly through that basic, bland, old false chord mid. And it allows you to have this smooth motion. It allows you to build a mid that is a place of rest for your voice. Ha! Imagine that. Being on stage and having vocal styles that are like little stepstones to places of rest. Then, if you're neutral, let's say you want to transition into a pitch scream. Let's say you want to transition into, well, I already did the high and the low, so that's kind of that. And my point is basically there. You have essentially a sound that you can use to stitch sounds together. Oh yeah. And if you're in a place of relaxation, right? You can move in and out. So this is why I think it's valuable for anybody who is doing anything that's not just your typical fry scream. And if you're fry scream, by the way, you're not blocked off from this. Just learn a really nice, neutral, kind of boring fry mid, right? It's not all false chord. You do whatever you want. But this is a very important way to understand not necessarily how to do it, but why we're doing it this way. That's key. Why are we doing it this way? What about our bodies needs it to be done this way? And so essentially, the goal here is create a tone, lean into the tone, control that leaned in tone, and then once you're there, transition into your false chord. Allow this to take time. Allow this to be frustrating. Allow your mistakes to inform your process, not detract you from it. And if you need any help, let me know. I do have a full roster of students right now, but still reach out. And that's all I got. That's my first tutorial of this style. Hopefully it was helpful. If you're running into this issue, let me know in the comments below. And with that, many thanks, much love. I'm out.